Draft physics video. Yay. Science, whatever. Mostly physics lately. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I'm going to just do a response to a couple of snarky video responses that aren't really videos or text, but whatever. I'll respond to it because it's there. You know, so some stuff just keeps coming up, which is really irritating, and people keep posting comments about GPS, and I've done a video. It has GPS in the title. You know, already explained that one. Anyway, so I have written some stuff. You know, I had written stuff, and I was doing a commentary more than an explanation, and so I kind of had to start over. So I don't have much yet. So this is essentially the substance of it. So I'll post it in the description. Quantons, I think that's what we'll go with. Yeah, that'll solve the problem of the naming problem. Because then we can still have photons, and we'll just have quantons do gravity and all the other nuclear forces and magnetism and all that stuff. Anyway, but it really is, you know, just writing it, I just came to the realization that this kinetic thing is the real deal. You know, this kinetic paradox, as I call it. The X thing. You know, that depending on how you look at it, you know, the two things go right through each other, or the two things bounce off of each other, and just depending on perception, really. Two different outcomes. I mean, the actual fact is that they do interact, and they are changed in direction individually. That's the fact of it. But I just mean perceptually. It's still, the end, the product is the same. The universe doesn't change through the interaction. Ironically, in a funny way. It just changes for individual quantons and their arrangement, and whether it's a true paradox or not doesn't really matter. It's just this is the circumstance that just makes it all possible. And when you think about it, it just answers all the questions that are the big ones. Anyway, so let's move on to Carla Della Stella has made 2 snarky videos, and so we will play them. So this is the older one first. Okay, so we'll do that first, and respond to these stupid comments. Okay, 4 postulates that will cost Eminem the Nobel Prize for Physics. So there's apparently some truth out there that's going to make it impossible. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. Why don't you just write this stuff in text and put it in the description or the comment section? Might force me to play the stupid video. 1. Displacement. So displacement. What the hell? What the hell is displacement? Oh, you mean something moves into something else's space and then moves it out? You mean it kinetically reacts or interacts in some physical way? It's relative. Therefore, well, you says you, right? So displacement is relative, whatever the fuck that means. Motion is relative. Well, sorry, that doesn't make any sense to me either. The speed of light isn't relative. It's always the same, and everything else basically has to obey the same rules. So, bullshit. Time is relative. Well, says you again. Therefore, time is not absolute. Well, it is absolute when it comes to the speed of light, isn't it? Yes, it is absolute. It's always the same. And once you've stated that fact and have a coherent universe based on it, as that being a real constant, not some kind of fake constant, then that's all there is. So therefore, Eminem is wrong. So there's no evidence here of anything. Absolutely nothing. Thank you for nothing. Okay, so you've made a nothing statement so far. Dun, 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 dun. So here we go. Displacement is relative. Here we go. Something can only have a position relative to something else. That doesn't even make any sense. In a sense that quite obviously, distance, movement away from each other, is all there is. That's what the whole universe is made out of, is stuff being identified as being separate from other stuff by some kind of distance, which is time. And that is not relative, it is absolute. To something else that defines what it means to have a position to begin with. Right, and it's an absolute position. Everything has an absolute position, and then something changes, and then positions change. But there is no magical change of position. There is no the universe to them to them over there is different than the universe over here. No, it's all the same universe. It just has different circumstances that exist in different piles of the universe. There is no such thing as absolute position, says you. There's no evidence of anything called a relative position. So why not? Everything has a position. Everything has a location. The photon that's traveling from the end of the universe here, okay, it had a position every single day, an absolute position. A position is somewhere, and that somewhere has to be different from the thing itself. I don't even know what that means. That somewhere has to be different than the thing itself. Obviously, the thing itself is occupying space. It's occupying somewhere. So how can it be different than the somewhere? That doesn't even... sorry, I can't make any sense out of that. Displacement is a change of position. There we go. Yay. Position is relative, says you. Therefore, displacement is relative. Well, guess what? That's circular reasoning. Your premise that position is relative is unproven by any fact that exists. It's relative to the background. Well, guess what? The background is the universe, not pieces of the universe in which it is located. Well, says you again. No evidence, just words. Yes, very nice that you can speak words, but words are meaningless. Alright, displacement is relative. I'm going to wait for that one to go away and this next one to show up. Alright, motion is relative. Motion is the continuous displacement of an object from a position to another position. Okay. And in the universe, that's kind of a standard thing that light does all the time, and it does it very consistently. Straight line from there to here, period. Since displacement is relative, therefore motion is also relative. Well, again, these are just axioms you're declaring as true, so you must have just say, God exists because I say so. Well, not even close. Not close to an argument. Time is relative, says you. Time is the relation between the motion of different objects. No, time is the byproduct of creation of distance. If something moves a distance, because of the constant, which is the speed of light, it can't move instantaneously, therefore it has to move at the speed of light, therefore creation of time exists, and it will move at some number, at some movement less than the speed of light. The speed of light or less. It will not move faster than. So time will be measured in terms of how long it takes it to acquire its new distance. Since motion is relative, oh crap, then time is also relative, says you again. So saying you just circularly defended the two. 1 minute time was relative and therefore motion is relative, now time is relative. So that's what use is this as an argument? It's evidence of nothing. It is even double relative because it's relative to the background in which things move and additionally relative between the things that move. So it's double relative. So it's relative to the relativity, and then the relativity is relative to the absoluteness. So why don't you just not bother with the relative crap and just say it's absolute in the first place? Why don't you just make it all relative to the absolute condition, which is the speed of light? Time is not absolute. Says again, space-time is relative. You just made that up. It isn't absolute. Well, there's no such thing as space-time, so it's just rubbish anyway, because there is no way it could be. Says you again, there can be no universal clock that is ticking in the void. Well, again, the clock, whole idea of a clock is a mechanical device that measures time based on a mechanical function. So depending on the clock, it'll run at a different speed. If I take a pendulum clock and put it in orbit, guess what? It'll move a lot slower. Okay, because the pendulum has less gravity, it's going to move a lot slower. Okay, but if I put an atomic clock in space, it's going to move faster. Because less gravity means less velocity, in a sense, less acceleration towards the Earth. That means the atoms can do their rotating, spinning thing without having to waste any part of their time doing the velocity thing in some direction. So the atomic clock will move faster, the pendulum clock will move slower, a mechanical ticking clock would likely move slower. So it all depends on what kind of mechanism you're using to measure time. And all you're doing is measuring it, and you're measuring it inaccurately, because time is the speed of light. So if you just measure how fast light's moving, then you'll know that this time hasn't changed at all. The speed of light is exactly the same. Einstein even said that, so this relativity crap doesn't really mean a fucking thing, because the speed of light is still constant in both frames of reference. So they're just frames of reference, and they really don't mean a damn thing, except, oh yes, you can understand that if there's already a pre-existing mutual velocity in a certain direction, then you can discount it because it cancels each other out. But that's all it means. It doesn't mean that the absolute universe has changed at all, or that they're not absolutely both moving in that vector direction at a certain velocity. Of course they are. It's just that that fucking momentum now cancels out as a distinction between them. It's like they both have common features. It's like if you weren't trying to find the difference between two people, and they had identical eyeballs, just identical, you know, twins or something. But everything else about them was different. Well, then you could just discount the eyeball thing and just measure all the other things as differences, right? So the things they have in common, you ignore. The things they have that are not common, you can pay attention to. And that's all relativity means. It doesn't mean it's an absolute truth. It doesn't mean there's anything such thing as a relative comparison. It just means that you're negating bothering with the things that are common to both, which is their velocity. There can be no universal clock that is ticking in the void, obviously, because that, well, the speed of light is the universal clock, and Einstein said so. Because that clock would already itself be something that is distinguished from the void and moving relative to it. And that's exactly the point. It would be moving, okay, relative to the absolute condition of the universe, so it would be moving relative to not moving. No movement relative to movement. Any velocity will change the metabolism of the thing with the velocity, period. And certain things have perpetual velocity, like photons and quantons, and everything else doesn't. Everything else has a velocity that is somehow made of a movement of their quantons in a certain direction over a net period. So each one is still moving the speed of light, and is just changing its overall directional vector in like 100. It has 100 directions, and its net overall direction is a little bit in one direction, and so then we call that a velocity, but it's not really a velocity because the pieces inside are still moving exactly the same speed. It's just that they've changed the amount of time they spend moving in a certain direction, and that's all that's changed. And that a little bit of time they're taking to move in that certain direction has slowed down the other processes that they were doing, creating time dilation. Anyway, if there is nothing but a void, then there can also be no time. Well, again, of nothing but a void, once you introduce just one photon moving at the speed of light, now you have time, because there is no motion of anything relative to any something. Well, it doesn't have to, obviously there has to be something for there to be time, right? Time is the, like I said, time is a byproduct of distance. Distance takes time. There's no such thing as instantaneous travel. Therefore, as soon as you introduce anything that moves from one place to another, you've created time, because nothing can instantaneously move. It is thus the things that are distinguished from the void that create time. Well, again, obviously it's things. You have to have something for there to be time, because time is a something, even though it's a abstract something. It's still a something that requires there to be something in the universe. Quite obviously, nothing has no properties. It can't have time as a property because it is nothing. And that time is relative between them and the void. Well, again, Einstein would not agree. Time is not relative. Time is absolute. The speed of light is absolute. It is a constant everywhere. It is the same everywhere. How you measure it is the problem. Your measuring devices change. Your measuring devices become retarded. Yeah, and that's the difference. So anyway, this is not an obstacle at all. So, haha on you. Let's see, somebody with some snarky comment. Indeed, remember the part in the film Interstellar in which each hour spent on a planet in proximity to a black hole equates to 7 years on Earth due to gravitational time dilation. Yeah, again, it's the argument from Stupid Movie. Right. They're sorry to disappoint you, but you will not find any gravitational time dilation. Acceleration in gravity, yes. That will cause things to gain velocity, more distance moved because you're bouncing in a gravitational field. That will cause you to accelerate. Acceleration will slow down atomic metabolism, but you won't dilate time. You'll just cryogenically freeze, so to speak, motion. You'll slow down the thing. You won't change time at all. The thing will get slowed down. That's all. There's no, time doesn't change. Metabolism changes. Function of the device changes. The clock ticks slower. Time doesn't change. The clock ticks slower. Big difference. Silly people. Alright, so let's go to the other one. I believe this one plays a clip of mine in it, but who cares? We can ignore that part. Skip over it or something. Alright, Emendum said it would pay for a peer review of his work on physics. Yes, I would pay somebody with some sort of competence in the subject, and you'd have to actually make a real argument. You can't just go, it exists because I say so. I don't have any evidence. I have no proof. I'm just going to say it. Well, that's not nearly good enough. I cannot offer a peer review because I'm not Emendum's peer. Well, whatever. But here is a superior review instead. Superior by what standard? Which is better than a mere peer review, right? You're superior how? Because you can say things with authority, like you know what you're talking about, when you have no anything to back it up with. Not one piece of real evidence. Not one fact. Please transfer a reviewing fee of $300 to the bank account in the low bar. Well, that ain't gonna happen, silly person. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, another DraftScience video.
Yay.
Number 7, I think, in the series on...
Yeah, the one to pay attention to is the Vloggerdome one. So, Vloggerdome 10. So that goes through the whole thing. And I think does it well enough.
Revolution time. So I was thinking I'd talk a little bit about special relativity. So this is the time thing. And it's the going backward. No, it's going...
Alright, well, anyway, this plays this. I didn't do this very articulately. Yes, that's right. I didn't do it very articulately. Great. Okay, anyway. So the point is that time dilation is just a phenomenon of matter having to move slower because it's moving somewhere very fast. So if I was dancing as fast as I could and somebody said, Gary, dance moving left. And so now I'm dancing as fast as I can. And if I have to move left, obviously I'm going to be dancing slower. I'm going to be able to do fewer steps in my dance because every 100 steps I'm going to have to move to the left one step. So I'm going to lose time by having to move distance. And that's what happens to matter. It just slows down in its process. Fewer orbits happen because the orbits are moving in a direction. Alright, why don't you look it up on the most successful collaborative free internet project for the common good of all times. Yeah, so this is a joke here. Wikipedia. Collaborative effort by a bunch of censoring Nazi-esque control freak fanatics. Thanks to its fantastic and well-respected editors. Okay, whatever. May God bless them for all the gift them with many children. And yeah, I hope they're gifted with, yes, go ahead, be blighted. Yes, may they be blighted. Who are constantly vigilant against those vandals. Okay, so this is where it gets just totally rude. You know, that seek to abuse. Abuse how? The editor's welcoming attitude. How was I welcomed? I was not welcomed. I made an edit. The editor said, I've deleted your edit. Tough shit. That's, welcoming. New contributors only to promote their own personal website. I wasn't promoting it. I was including it in a category it belongs in. On it, and then threaten to sue them afterwards for entirely narcissistic reasons that don't. Oh, so yeah, it's okay for somebody to accuse somebody else of vandal crimes without any evidence. That's okay. When their vandalism, here we go again, has failed despite sock puppetry. So again, more accusations with no evidence. So I mean, what can I say? You either up this game or I'm not going to respond to you anymore. How about that? Because this is just fucking rude, alright? You don't have any evidence of any of this stuff. You just make up these lies and then you say them. I mean, you know how rude that is? I mean, even if it's a joke, it's just not funny. I mean, really. Fuck you, you pedophile. What is the project I'm talking about? Oh, please, let's not do this Wikipedia shit. I didn't know this was a Wikipedia video. I thought it was about something real. Let's see, play this part. What are they talking about?
Playing some kind of passive-aggressive, bizarro game, is it? No, not at all.
Okay, Wikipedia. Alright, here we go. Relative velocity time dilation. When two observers are in a relative uniform motion, that means when they both have that motion you might as well throw out, and uninfluenced by any gravitational mass, the point of view of each will be that the other's moving clock is ticking at a slower rate than the local clock. Well, again, both of them are going to have a slower metabolism, so in fact, the viewer will see exactly what the other guy sees. Their perception of the other guy moving slower will not actually be a perception of them moving slower, because they're actually going to be moving slower also. So in fact, in actual fact, their brain will not process it the same way. So if I move your brain at a velocity, your neurons, everything will move slower, it'll function differently. Okay, I won't even say it'll move slower, because guess what? You're not going to change some things like electricity and all that kind of stuff. But you're certainly going to change the trigger points and how quickly they react and how quickly the chemistry reacts and all this other stuff. So you're going to definitely fuck the brain up. So there will be no perception, okay, unless this is all done by mechanical instruments. And if you make it mechanical instruments, you're still going to run into the same problem, because if their velocity is sufficient to slow down the metabolism of their matter, their atoms sufficiently, it will change their capacity to process, and that means that light coming in will get processed different. So ultraviolet light will look like infrared light, and all kinds of things like that will take place. And so the light they expel is going to look like it's going faster or slower depending on which direction you're moving towards the other object at, whether you're moving towards them or away from them. The dynamics are going to be fundamentally different, but there will be no, I will move at a very fast velocity and pretend my matter works just the way it did before. It will not work just the way it did before. You will break it. Okay, uniform mode influenced by any gravitation from the point of view of each will be the other's moving. Yeah, clock is ticking at a slower rate than the local clock. Like I said, your local clock is going to be broken also. The faster the relative velocity, the greater the magnitude of time dilation. So the relative velocity, you mean the velocity away from each other or towards each other, because there is no, the absolute velocities have already been negated. So, and again, you can't go faster than the speed of light, so you can't have any absolute velocity. You can't have some shared velocity that, say, is 3/4 the speed of light, and then, on top of that, move relative to each other half the speed of light, because that would equal, 1.25 the speed of light. You can't move faster than the speed of light, so that's not possible. So all this is bullshit. The faster the relative velocity, the greater the magnitude of time dilation. The faster the absolute velocity, the greater the magnitude of time dilation. So no matter, even if you have shared velocity that's 3/4 the speed of light, both of your metabolisms will have been substantially changed, and neither of you are going to be functioning as anything called complex matter, because all the complex functions will be degraded by the retardation of the atomic function. This case is sometimes called special relativistic time dilation. Well, oh, there's a Wikipedia page. Gee, full of shit, no doubt. You can call it whatever you want. There's no evidence of it. Again, no facts here, just statements. Nothing. Nothing real. So we'll play this because there's some clip of mine here.
So anyway, motion's an incredibly interesting thing, you know, this idea of velocity. There's a clip of a Feynman video I could play, but I'm not going to bother, where he says, yeah, we don't know why things keep moving. So it's like, I like that Feynman understood that this is sort of a question that somebody should have answered.
Right, so the interesting part is like, say something has a perpetual velocity, I push it in space and it keeps moving. The idea is that people just say, oh, it has momentum. Well, what do you mean it has momentum? Its atoms are moving through space. Something has to make them do that. You know, the atoms are little orbitals, and you're saying the whole solar system is moving. Well, why does it just keep moving? How does it keep doing that? What mechanical, you know, and the mechanical is that the ellipses being created by the reshaping of the orbits inside of the protons, the neutrons, the electrons, they've all ellipsed in a direction, and it's that ellipse that is eating time. So they're actually moving less distance this way, more distance at the top, and that means that the orbit just keeps rolling in a sense, because it's taking more steps one way, less steps the other way, and so the orbit rolls through space. And that's what the atoms are doing when you have a velocity. Your atoms are rolling in the direction of the velocity. So let's see whether you actually answer it yourself. Well, that's not good. This isn't what you call a fact either.
You know, it's all well and good to say without friction it just keeps moving. Once it's got accelerated, it'll just maintain its acceleration. Yep.
Say, to cut that off, obviously it doesn't maintain it for no reason. It maintains it for a reason, because the matter itself has been changed. And until the matter is changed again, until it meets another force that bends the orbits back, that forces the orbits back into more circular pattern and less elliptical, more in one direction than in the other, then it's going to remain in that state, and it'll keep going in that direction until it is physically changed by interacting with new force that exchanges directional information, and now it consumes the extra direction it has in that direction. No, it doesn't maintain its acceleration, it merely maintains the velocity. Well, again, the words acceleration and velocity, I made the mistake of saying the word acceleration, but I think any rational person would have known I was talking about velocity. Acceleration creates velocity, and that's what I was talking about. In the context of the video, that would have been perfectly understood, so this is just bullshit. It has achieved by then. That's basic physics, but keep going. Yeah, well, it's not basic physics to sit there and say something keeps moving for no reason. That's just magic. I mean, let me hear you explain why it keeps moving. It's consuming space. It's eating space. How is it doing that? How mechanically are the little nuclear bits being propelled through space? What's causing them to move through space?
Yeah, okay, that might fool some of the people some of the time, but no, there really needs to be an explanation for why does it keep going? Going is doing.
Here we go. Going is doing. You are currently moving around the sun with a velocity of nearly 30 kilometers a second, yet you aren't doing anything. Well, it says you. I mean, quite obviously my matter's doing a hell of a lot, right? Right now it's being pushed down into the Earth. The Earth is spinning. So I actually have two motions. The atoms, the nuclear bits, are actually being accelerated. They're actually falling at 10 meters a second. Okay, they're doing it all the time, constantly being pushed down, and then they've been pushed back up because there's matter below me, and the matter below me has got a force pushing back up. So I just keep bouncing, in a sense. The matter inside of me, the atoms, keep jiggling up and down, so they're going like this. And then they have the motion of the earth, so they're going like this as a frequency, and you can quite easily understand that that's a lot of distance being covered by those nuclear bits. They're moving an awful lot of distance, so in reality their velocity, my internal part's velocity, is extremely high. Yet you aren't doing anything. Why? Because going is relative. Well, bullshit. Going is absolute. You are moving relative to the sun. Well, obviously, relative to the sun, I am moving, but that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I could be slowing down relative to this, to the absolute velocity. Yet you aren't moving relative to the Earth's surface. I'm not moving anyway. My nuclear bits are doing the moving. My subatomic particles are actually doing the moving. They're the thing I'm made out of. That's where the real universe is. See, the empty space is out here in space, but it really goes all the way down. The real universe goes all the way down to the little tiny bits, the photons, the quantons. That's where the real universe is. Alright, so you're not getting it. That those are the parts that are actually moving. Position is relative, so is motion, so is time. Well, says you. Declarations based on no factual experimental evidence. Thank you, not so much. Here's some more of me.
Configured in such a way as the overall net circular motions are eccentric or are elliptical in the direction.
This is what I already explained. So, do the circular thing. Here we go. So, what's circular motions exactly? There's circular motions inside, let's say, an electron. An electron is made up of quanta going the speed of light, and the neutron and the proton and whatever other bullshit you want to make up. But anyway, those are all just systems. They're like solar systems, and they have orbits, and they have a mechanics. And that mechanics gets stretched in the direction of overall velocity. You want to explain why things keep moving with more movement. No, I'm just explaining why things keep moving with the parts that are actually doing the moving. There's only, look, again, I'll go back to the argument. Everything, there is nothing but little bits moving the speed of light. Everything is made of those. E equals mc squared? No. Energy, matter equals energy. Matter is energy trapped. It is photons, quantons, moving the speed of light, caught in orbits. That's what matter is. It's already moving. Circular motion is also a kind of motion. Well, again, it's not really a kind of motion in the sense that it's a trap of direction. That is, in a perfect circle, your direction is negated. All the little directions come up with a zero, the same as the zero direction. And it's not until your circle is in some way bent that you have a net direction. So why do atoms keep moving circularly to begin with? Well, they don't really. That's the whole point. There aren't any of these perfect circles. If they do, and how do you know? Well, the how do you know thing you have to infer from the evidence that does exist. And I guess what I'm saying is that the conservation rules and the fact that it makes perfectly good sense, this whole time dilation argument of you can't dance the same speed and move in a direction, sort of makes it sensible. That atoms move circular. Well, the point is that's how a trap works. And now you could call it a tetrahedron. You could call it any kind of it doesn't. Circular is just a word to use to describe something that's closed. So you could say box, but box is a little harder to understand. But you could say if there was just 4 interaction points, you know, at each corner, and at each corner you just change its direction 90 degrees, you could see that something could just stay in the box forever if you just change its direction by 90 degrees at each corner. So you could add as many facets as you want, and then when you get to the point where you'll call the faceted object a circle, who cares? Any empirical evidence? Citation needed. Well, I would say the same thing to you. Citation needed. Okay, where's your evidence? You don't have any evidence, okay, of anything. You've never moved. Let me see you move a photon with gravity alone. Let me see you do it. You have just surmises, and I can just do the same surmising, and my argument is going to be is that my surmises are going to be more consistent with reality than yours. That they're going to be more accurate in the end. The conclusions drawn based on understanding of this conservation of directional information, which is the same as conservation of information, but it's really directional information, will rule the day.
Atoms, you know, to make it
So
simple, just think of the electrons.
So here we go.
This has to be true for all the nuclear elements.
Draw the
But
picture.
let's just make it easier for just think of
already.
electrons. And
There we
what's
go.
happening
There they go.
is they're biting off space.
See, they're moving more in that direction than this
So
direction.
This is with time, of course.
Yeah,
So obviously
see.
they don't leave a vapor trail behind.
Yes.
My pens are all kind of iffy. Yeah.
So you really didn't need this
Some
part.
work.
You already saw the picture basically.
They need to be worked a little more.
You got
Anyway,
the idea.
I can see that very well. But yeah, so the idea would be this is the motion
Technically, these
would
all
end up
become
being in a
ellipses
direction
because they're
because
wider at the
spiral
top
needs
than
a
they
little
are
more
at the
space.
bottom. So they're constantly an ellipse if you put them on top of each other. How do you know that electrons move along a spiral? How do I know? I don't have a picture of an electron, either do you. The idea would be, though, is we know what happens when you destroy an electron. We know certain things about what they contain. And the fact is they contain this stuff moving the speed of light, a certain amount of it. And that's consistent with the idea that if you eviscerated the sun in a moment, then all the planets would just fly off like energy. Why don't they move like this instead? So here we have some whatever wacky pattern. Because there's no coherency to whatever this is. What, Jesus or something you're going to write or something? I don't know what you're, Jehovah or something, I don't know. Obviously they could end up in very eccentric motions depending on what it is they're orbiting. So the fact is their motion could be quite erratic. I drew it as a spiral just to point out that they're moving more distance to go this far. They're moving a tremendous amount of distance. So the fact that the spiral could be in some ways warped by interactions with photons, protons, neutrons, obviously as the whole atom is being distorted by motion, those distortions could come up with all kinds of eccentricities in the motion. But the point is that the overall direction will increase greatly. Distance will increase greatly for a tiny bit of velocity. What appears to be velocity. Obviously the velocity from here to here, counted as a straight line, would seem like that could be 10 miles an hour. But if you really followed the course that it actually took, the velocity the thing has to be going has to be 500 miles an hour, because it's much longer distance it actually traveled to get from point A to point B. So I don't know what this is for. Why repeat the same shit over again? Huh? Yeah, I don't get that. Citation needed. Well, again, you don't have any citations to anything called a fact. You just have Einstein's theories. You just have a bunch of people doing theoretical physics. And I'm saying that once you draw these pictures, once you build this model, it will explain every phenomenon that exists. It explains what holds the atoms together, it explains magnetism, it explains electricity, it explains photons, it explains it all. So, like I said, you can have your little laugh, but I'll have the last laugh. and I will laugh best. So, fuck you, you skanky pedophile cunt. So, Gary, it's called a vector. Okay? Yeah, I said vector. I don't know. You know you're fucked if you can't remember going backwards or forwards. LOL. I don't know what that means. Skyzer is retarded. He's actually probably been diagnosed a retard. Great video. Very funny. Well, an audience of one. Yeah. So, whatever. So anyway, enough of that crap. Yeah, it really wasn't worth the trouble. So, yeah, so where do I want to get to? I don't think I'll add anything else. I mean, I could read a couple other comments, but I don't think they're really worthy at this stage. I don't think. Let me just reload this thing. I don't think there were any good comments. This one might have something on it. Quickly.
Hyman said.
Okay, yeah, that's the Hoffman Day response. Yeah, so this was the special. Yeah, I thought I posted a response. I think it was on the other video to the link to my GPS, the one that has GPS in the title. If special and general relativity are false, as you have stated many times, how do you explain the satellite's atomic clock speeding upwards about 38 microseconds faster than the clocks on Earth? Right, so they're faster than the clocks on Earth. I have explained that. Quite obviously, we're their motion, well, our motion aren't, no, they're actually, yeah, 38 microseconds faster. So if they had more velocity, you'd expect them to be going slower. But we're actually the ones with more velocity here on Earth because we're in the stronger gravity. They're in the weaker gravity. We're in the stronger gravity. So even though their horizontal velocity is faster than ours, our vertical down velocity is much faster than theirs. So in net we have more velocity here in the heavier gravity than they have in the weaker gravity. The closer you are to an extremely heavy mass object, the more time slows down. Well, you know what I mean? You know, the closer you are, you could just say the more gravity, the heavier the gravity you're in, the more acceleration that's taking place on the atomic level. Your atoms are being accelerated by gravity. The protons, neutrons, and electrons are being accelerated by gravity. Gravity doesn't affect you, it affects your nuclear bits. If time dilation and relative motion don't occur, we wouldn't have to account for it in GPS systems. Well, who said they didn't occur? So, liar, liar, liar. I've said over and over that it does occur, and I'm explaining why it occurs. Because if you're dancing as fast as you can, and I ask you to move in a direction, you're going to dance slower. Everything would be perfectly accurate up to 5 to 10 meters. Oh wait, we do account for it. No, you don't really account for it. You just make up some kind of space does this bendy thing. So that's not really accounting for something, right? To say that nothing made it happen, that isn't accounting for it. That's providing no explanation whatsoever. That's saying the magic forces did magical things. I'm explaining how it materially happens. Okay? More directional arrows get exchanged when you're in the heavier gravity. Okay? Meaning that more you're changing in your net direction, and therefore there's more parts of you moving in a direction. Which means you're going to, if you're a circle, you're going to slow down as the circle has to move faster in a direction. Oh wait, if we don't in a couple of hours, GPS system, yeah, again, I've accounted for it, and it's just a lie to imply that I somehow say there is no time dilation. I'm saying there is time dilation, and I'm explaining why it exists. It's because atoms have a metabolism, and if you force them to move a velocity, their metabolism slows down. You might want to at least learn calculus. You might want to fuck yourself in the ass until dead if you were going to stray from Newton's mechanics and relativity. Newton invented calculus, so this is a stupid argument anyway. As well, understand mathematical properties before you begin criticizing standard theories. They're not standard theories, they're theoretical physics, and they're crap. They're wrong. Okay, they're wrong descriptions of reality. Photons have no magical properties. Photons are dumb as sticks. They don't create interference patterns. They don't have a wave function. They don't have an electromechanical any kind of function. They're just little tiny bits moving the speed of light in a straight line, and the only thing they can do is interact with an electron, and electrons emit photons. They absorb them and they re-emit them, and whatever funkiness the photon appears to do, it's only doing because the electron imposed the funkiness on it. Your assumptions are wrong. You're an idiot, a fool, and a fucktard, and you're rude to boot. Fuck you. Alright. Let's see. Revealing the fact that electrons are firing through the slit are not balls or marbles in reality. They are electromagnetic waveforms. No, they're not. Created as... there's nothing that's electromagnetic. There's nothing that's a wave. A wave is not... none of these things are waves. Created as emission products of their electron gun. Well, that's just silly. The academicians play a shell game with their audience. They swap balls and marbles for electromagnetic wave. There is no electromagnetic waves. By implying that the electrons they are shooting from their guns are the same mathematical electrons in their theoretical table of elements called the Mendeleev table. Yeah, whatever. You're just replacing nonsense with nonsense. Yes, their nonsense is nonsense, but don't replace it with more nonsense. Wave is a phenomenon of a medium, and it's made out of something that has to have tension in it. You can't have a wave in something that doesn't have tension. The tension is already being created by these gravitational, these attractive and repulsive forces that are tying these things to each other because they're in this constant pressure. And it is in that medium that you can have a pattern of directional migration, a migration of a mass of directional information will move through something. But that's it. It's just a migration of this packet of information, which in that form can appear as energy. But it has to be conserved in the end, blah, 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 blah. Push gravity theory would have to come with an explanation of how the particles that do the pushing, now they don't do pushing. So again, if you understand kinetic, okay, they don't push. Alright, they exchange. The two steel balls bouncing into each other, kinetic balls, right? Bang, 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 and you could go on forever if you took friction away. Why? What are they doing? They're just exchanging directional information. One ball has none, it gives it to the other one. Then the other one has none, it gives it to the other. Just exchanging directional information, period. There's no pushing, per se. And why that push exactly matches the push against ordinary matter. Well, again, the reason why it matches is because it's all happening on the atomic level in the first place. Gravity is happening to nuclear parts. It is not happening to any other parts of you. Gravity does not hit other parts of you. Gravity goes right the fuck through you and only hits your atomic parts. And that's the only parts that are being influenced by gravity. Alright, so I used fish hooks as an analogy for the idea of just explaining how tangled things can get when mechanisms meet mechanisms. So instead of explaining how gravity ties them together, I just said, okay, let's just ignore the gravity thing and just call it a hook, okay? So just to simplify it. And so you're throwing two schools of fish into each other that have a hook. Now the truth is the two schools of fish, if they were flying into each other, would have, if they were atomic bodies, they would have this gravitational thing, this shadowing effect. So as they get near each other, they would shadow each other, which drive each other into each other. So to simplify it, I used hooks as a metaphor. This asshole can't seem to understand that. Metaphor is too complicated for him. He's too stupid. Got grand unified theory. The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe and everything. School of fish. Yeah, well, the school of fish is an excellent metaphor. So if you just think of fish, as being indestructible, okay, only go one speed, alright, so they're indestructible and they only travel one speed, and then all they can do is bang into each other and exchange kinetically directional information. You'll see that the school of fish is a very good metaphor, and it's certainly a great metaphor for understanding that when a school of fish is in one location, a big mass of fish, and the fish are all swirling around each other, the idea that there's exactly the same amount of energy, the same amount of plankton getting hit, the same amount of seawater being breathed in and out, as there would be if all the fish were moving in one direction. So it's a great metaphor for the conservation principle, the idea that matter is just an illusion, that it really is just fish moving in a direction, and when you move them all in a chaotic direction, all the directions cancel out, like the perfect circle. All the directions cancel out, so you end up with no direction as a net product of the interaction. But the truth is, exactly the same amount of energy exists. God, you people are just such obnoxious, stupid motherfuckers. Yeah. Anyway, so, see you all the next time. But, yeah, so far what I've written is pretty, I mean, this idea of the kinetic thing, it's just so, I mean, you know, as I was going through this thing, yeah, I'm saying, okay, yeah, it's getting simpler, and, yeah, this is getting more and more clear. And then it just, you know, it just fell on me, so like a shit, it's just so obvious that this is the thing that's fooled us all along, is this idea of this kinetic interaction, this idea that it's nothing or it's something, just depending on how you look at it. Yeah, that's big. Anyway, till next time.